Hey, listen, 91.3 WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee. Sorry. We are here. It is Friday, talking about child abuse and bullying. It's 1:03, and in the studio right now we have somebody from the Alberti Center. Sorry if I mutilated that name. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Dr. Amanda Nickerson. I am a professor in the Graduate School of Education at the University at Buffalo, and I also direct the Alberti Center for Bullying Abuse Prevention there.
Can you explain a little about what that is?
Sure. So we started in 2011. There was an alum of the Graduate School of Education named Dr. Jean Alberti, who trained as a clinical psychologist and was working with individuals in adulthood in her private practice in Chicago, and found that many of them had suffered from bullying in their younger years. And she gave a generous endowment to the Graduate School of Education to say, this is a topic that we really need to pay more attention to, that we need to study, and we need to get that research into the hands of people that can do something about it. So she started the center with the endowment, and I came on as the director in 2011 and have been doing that ever since.
What kinds of things do you do at the center?
Sure. So our primary mission is really to contribute original research to trying to understand more about the problem of bullying, how to prevent it, how it occurs. So we do a lot of studies looking at the impact of bullying on what we call the targets of bullying, as well as perpetrators. A real passion of mine is also in the role of the bystander. So those are the people that see and hear the bullying happen, and the behaviors that they engage in, whether it is to contribute and kind of make it worse or to try to help and make it better. Also very interested in looking at what schools can be doing, what parents, and what the larger peer group can be doing to help with this problem. So in addition to the research, we also do a lot of education and outreach, both through the university. So we have a colloquium series where we bring researchers and professionals that are interested in this topic to give talks about the work that they're doing. Those are open to the public and also attended by faculty and students. We also have an annual conference, so that's a full-day event in the fall. This past year's conference, we were looking at social emotional learning and prevention of bullying. And this coming September, our conference is going to be focused on bullying and individuals with disabilities. We also offer the 6-hour required training for anybody that is going to be certified to work in New York State schools. The Dignity for All Students Act was legislation that was passed in 2012 and said anybody that's going to be working in the schools needs to have training on harassment, intimidation, bullying, prevention. So we are a provider of that training as well.
I know we definitely have a 6-hour bullying class here at Buff State. Is it all connected?
Yeah, Buffalo State is also an approved provider of it. So there's several across the state that have to apply to New York State Ed to become an approved provider, and then they can offer that. So Buff State is one of them, yes.
Okay, because this semester, not even because I needed to for my actual classes, I just randomly went out and signed up for all the certification classes I could find.
Wow, good for you.
And one of them is, I know it's 6 hours and it has to do with bullying.
Yes, that would be it, yeah.
Can you, I know that right before we got on, you were talking about a little bit that you've worked you've experienced with bullies and victims. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, this was, back during my training and my internship and working in schools and also residential treatment facilities. These were issues that definitely came up, so these were kids that were usually the ones that I have experience working with are those with emotional and behavioral disorders. So they already are displaying kind of aggressive behaviors or lack social skills and things like that. And they were engaging in some of these behaviors. Also, on the other end, kids that had been targeted by bullying, whether it was because of their disability, because of their perceived sexual orientation, or just in some way being singled out as a different or vulnerable.
Can you explain a little about, say, for the parents that are having their children come home and their children are just acting different, some of the symptoms that would point out that this child might be being bullied?
Yeah. So some of the classic signs of bullying are first, any change in behavior. So if there's someone that used to be social or hang out with a certain peer group and they've changed that, they aren't with certain kids anymore, they're more withdrawn or isolated. Certainly if there's any like cuts, bruises, damaged belongings for which they don't have an explanation. Also wanting to avoid social situations or school. Sometimes kids will say they have stomach aches or headaches, but there's no real physical explanation for it. So, part of the difficulty with some of these symptoms or signs is that they could be signs of a lot of other things as well. That could be depression.
Mm-hmm.
It could be some other form of abuse. It could be drug use. So what I try to tell people is if you see those kinds of signs, ask what's going on. Ask about how things are going at school, how things are going with peers. But they are definitely signs to look out for, whether or not it's that someone's being bullied or that something else might be going on for them.
And then say you get your child to explain that what's going on at school or wherever else it may be. What are some of the things that you should do or start doing?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing is listen. I mean, kids don't want the parent to say, well, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to do that. What they need first and foremost is support, and to know that somebody is listening to them, someone believes them. And I think problem solving with your child, like what have they already tried? When is this happening? What's going on with it? And what kind of support do they need? I mean, I definitely recommend that parents let the school know, but the reality is that a lot of kids don't want that to happen. They think that it's going to make it worse. And unfortunately, sometimes it does. Sometimes our adult interventions, and even if they're the most well-intentioned, it can lead to retaliation, or it can lead to some of these other kinds of consequences. So I think for parents, you need to kind of understand where the child is coming from, what's happening, what you can do to support them, helping them kind of problem solve some of these issues. And certainly getting the school involved, but, working in partnership, not just calling and blaming the school and saying you need to do this and that, but this is what's going on, this is my concern, what are some ways that you have to handle it, can we work together on this?
Is there proper protocol, or maybe you don't know, but is there proper protocol in schools for if there is bullying going on?
Yes. So with the Dignity for All Students Act, it's put a lot more kind of procedures in place for how to handle it. So all schools now have to have in their code of conduct that bullying and harassment is prohibited. And they have to go through a series of steps if bullying is made known to them. So finding out more about the situation, which can involve interviewing the students, other students that are around, finding out more about what's happening, and taking, reasonable steps to try to intervene with it. Whether that be, consequences, and hopefully more than just consequences, trying to teach the person who is bullying better ways of managing whatever function of the behavior that bullying is serving for them. So, some really want power and control. Is there a more pro-social way to get that power and control? But also providing support to the child that's victimized and doing everything that they can to prevent it from happening again. More supervision, more support, those kinds of things.
I know as a child that I was actually bullied a lot, and one of the reasons that I realized putting two and two together was just because I was an outsider. I went through a lot of different schools, popping in and out of different like private schools, public schools. So I noticed that there was a lot of like there was social cliques, and if you didn't fit in any of the social cliques that usually grew up since like kindergarten in the same school, there was a lot of repercussions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that we're, finding more and more. And it sounds like it wouldn't surprise you that it's so much about belongingness and social status and fitting in. And unfortunately, people that are either perceived as different or they're more isolated, don't have as many friends or that ingrained peer group, then they're going to be more vulnerable to being bullied.
So I know that with this center, you try to do original research. Is there any of the research that you can share with us that you found?
Sure. So one thing that may be of interest, since we're talking about the Dignity for All Students Act, is we were really interested in looking at does the Dignity for All Students Act make a difference? I mean, are we seeing any change as a result of this legislation? It's really hard to study change in legislation because there's so many other things that are happening in schools and in kids' lives. So how do you really isolate that? But what we did was we surveyed New York State educators before the implementation of the Dignity for All Students Act and after. And we essentially asked, what are the policies and procedures that you are following and practices regarding bullying prevention? And then we asked them questions about the severity of bullying and harassment, school climate, those kinds of things. And what we found was that schools that had more what we call kind of adherence to the Dignity for All Students Act, they followed more of the components, that was related to having less severe bullying and harassment problems and a more positive school climate. But interestingly, when we looked at it across time, because we looked before the implementation of the act and after, there was no effect of time. So what that said to us was that schools that are doing these things that the Dignity for All Students Act says to do are doing better off in terms of bullying, but we can't say conclusively that it was because of the legislation. It may have been that they were just engaging in these practices anyways. So that's one study. And as I've mentioned, one of my real areas of interest is the role of the bystander. So we've done a series of studies looking at what is it that kind of makes the difference in kids that will stand up and try to stop the bullying. And that can be either directly, saying, stop, leave that kid alone, or indirectly by providing support to the kid that's victimized, telling a teacher. And our studies have found that the degree to which kids have empathy, that they feel bad that this is happening to somebody else, that they can put themselves in the other person's shoes, that seems to be predictive of whether or not they're going to help. We've also found that relationships with mothers, like more supportive relationships, better communication and trust and things like that, kids that report having stronger relationships with their moms are also more likely to intervene. And we found some really interesting gender differences as well. So we thought that kids that whose peers would say, bullying is unacceptable, would be more likely to intervene and stop the bullying. But we actually have only found that for boys. For girls, there seems to be this really interesting relationship where their friends are often the ones that that they think are pro-bullying, and so girls may be more likely to take the role of being the bully sometimes, being victimized sometimes, and sometimes trying to intervene and defend. So again, it might not surprise people who, know girls or were girls, but that some of the bullying for girls really seems to happen within that peer group. So it's not this, this group of kids that are socially isolating and victimize somebody else, but maybe they're doing it both within their own peer group. So that's some of the research we've done.
Can you explain? You've talked about it a couple of times. Can you explain the Dignity for Children? What is
Dignity for All Students Act?
Okay, yes.
Sure. So that was legislation that was passed in 2012, and then it was amended in 2013 to include cyberbullying as well. So the intent of that act is to create school environments that are free from bullying, discrimination, and harassment. Basically saying everybody in New York State that attends now it only applies to public schools and charter schools, but not private schools, that they have the right to be in a safe environment. So what the Dignity Act mandates is that first, all schools have in their code of conduct that bullying and harassment are unacceptable, that they outline the protected classes. So those are things like they explicitly say that someone can't be bullied or harassed because of race or ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, disability status, weight is one of them. So there's many different protected classes. Schools also have an obligation to provide training to their staff about bullying and harassment. They are also supposed to be integrating into their character education information about the protected classes and bullying and harassment. They also once a year have to report to New York State the number of incidents, the material incidents, they call it, of bullying, intimidation, and harassment, and that information is actually publicly available. And new, in the amendment of 2013, I believe, was when this took effect, that there was this mandatory 6-hour training that anybody that's going to be certified to work in New York State schools would have to have that training. Oh, and one other part that I forgot that's probably very important is that every school has to have a Dignity Act coordinator. So that's a specific person in the school that should be known to parents and students, where that's responsible for kind of coordinating these efforts. And if there are any incidents of bullying, then it would come to that person's attention.
What is the protocol? I see my knowledge comes a lot from listening to different things that are going on Facebook. I'm on a lot of different kinds of groups, and they will usually post something, and it happens a lot where their child is bullied, and they try to go to the school, and the school is just like, we dealt with that, blah, 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 but it wasn't. Like, sometimes the children are coming back with like bruises, cuts, scrapes, and things like this, but the school is just like, we're going to deal with it. And when I'm reading something like that, I'm thinking, well, if a child is willing to actually like physically hurt another child, something is going on in that child's actual home life where it makes him think that he can actually put his hands on somebody else. Like, in situations like that, what is a parent supposed to do when they don't feel like the school is actually following the Dignity Act or doing things like they would want?
Yeah. Well, I think there's, and I talk a lot to parents and then to schools, and you hear it's so hard because there are these different sides, and sometimes if schools say to parents, we're dealing with it, they are, and they can't divulge for, privacy considerations exactly what they're doing in terms of disciplining their child and things like that. But if you're saying that the parents feel like they're being ignored and that the schools are not really following through and taking it seriously, then document. I mean, every time that the child comes home and says something, documenting that, taking it to somebody else in the school and or at the district level. You usually would work through the Dignity Act coordinator, which in some buildings it's an administrator, in others it's the mental health professional. In some there's more than one. But if you really feel like your voice is not being heard and things aren't changing, then taking it up to more of a district level. And certainly there's recourse in terms of, if it's like a civil rights violation, there's the Office of Civil Rights that people can call. They can, parents can get a lawyer involved. I always try to advocate really trying to work in partnership with the schools and not take that more kind of adversarial kind of approach. But if you have to advocate and protect your child and that is not, being met, then parents certainly need to know that they have other options and feel empowered to use those.
Is there resources or, say, actual advocates out there that know the laws and the specific act and all of the protocol that's supposed to be happening that can go with them if they don't feel like they know enough, but they know something's not right?
That's a really good question. There's certainly lawyers, educational lawyers that know the law, and that would be kind of the place that I think most parents would go. But as just an advocate that would help with that, I don't know of any off of the top of my head.
I think that would be something that would be nice if it existed, because there's advocates for all the different kinds of there's advocates for disabilities, for domestic violence, for sexual assault, and there's so many different kinds of advocates. But then bullying is taking over and it's going through all of our public TV shows, and it's going through it, like the suicide rates are because of bullying are going up, and it just seems like something that we need.
Mm-hmm. In terms of having an advocate being able to, I think that we need to look at those other models, and there may well be that kind of thing that I'm not aware of, which would be a little bit surprising, but it is definitely possible that there are, organizations or parent groups or Child and Family Services or something like that someone could go and have an advocate, if you're not talking about going the legal route, which is what some people obviously do if they really want to be able to advocate and have someone who knows the law help represent them.
Is there any kind of services that the center provides for the public to help out with anything?
Well, we do a lot of outreach in schools and communities in the form of education. So we have worked with students, with parents, with teachers and professional staff about educating them about the issues of bullying, what they can do, what resources are out there. We are not a direct service agency, though, so we definitely have resources to refer people if, your child is being bullied and you want them to have therapy or something like that. That's above and beyond what we do. But we definitely are integrated in the community in providing those sort of educational services.
What are some of the programs that you go through the schools doing?
So we've done everything from, we really individualize it for what the schools want. So if it is professional development, schools usually will say we kind of want our staff to all be on the same page about what is bullying, what are our obligations under the Dignity for All Students Act, what's best practice in terms of preventing and if we see it, and what are some things to avoid. So we'll do some of those kinds of things. With students, similarly, we've done everything from assemblies at different age levels to working more in depth with chosen student leaders and kind of how they can help contribute to a climate where this doesn't happen, or that a climate of upstanders, if you will, where if people see it, then they'll do something about it. So that might be role plays and small group discussions. And, we always try to integrate media clips and things like that into the kinds of work that we do.
And then for the listeners that are paying attention right now, how would they find the Dignity for All Students Act and actually read it to educate themselves?
They can go on to the New York State Education website, and there is a web page about the Dignity for All Students Act. I'm sorry that I don't know exactly what it is off the top of my head, but if you Google New York State Dignity for All Students Act, it will definitely come up. Also, if people are welcome to come to the Alberti Center web page, which is also a very easy Google, and under that we have resources for parents, teens, educators, and under that we have links right to the Dignity for All Students Act and things like that.
So how can people contact you if they wanted to ask any kind of questions or anything about the website or anything?
Sure. Probably the best way is email, and they can just email the Alberti Center, which is literally alberticenter@buffalo.edu. And then my personal email is Nickersa, Nickersa @buffalo.edu. And again, just coming to our website, gsc.alberticenter.edu, I believe is I should have had it right in front of me, but again, it's very easy to find. And like I said, we have a lot of resources on there. I will just point out we have fact sheets that are just front and back, everything from bullying in the LGBTQ community, what high schoolers need to know about bullying, parents and bullying, the role of peers. We also have a YouTube channel where we have a lot of different clips about bullying that you can use as points of reference to talk about bullying. We also are very active on social media, so on Facebook and Twitter. So we're constantly posting new information about the prevention of bullying that we've come up with and from other organizations. So I really encourage people to come and connect with us that way. You can go right to our main website and connect with us via social media that way.
Is there any kind of last final thoughts that you would like to address with the listeners?
Well, I'd just like to say thanks for listening and for taking this on as a topic. It's, as you've said, it's really important in our society today, and it's great that it's being included.
Well, we would like to thank you. Love to thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to WBNY 91.3, WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982. Jeez.